welcome back to Texas. It's been a few months. I apologize for the infrequency which I've been posting lately. Life's been a bit chaotic, but as soon as things sort of straighten out here, be like a pinched hose finally released, you know? I'm gonna just get a lot to catch up on. I'm about 1 year behind where I wanted to be at this time, but anyway, let's do it. Now, one thing you'll notice about this particular leg of the journey in Texas is there's a lot of interwoven stories that deal with a lot of the Texan lore, a lot of the larger-than-life characters that appear in the early stories about Texas, and it's, these are stories, sometimes I was actually raised on a lot of these, and it's a little bit difficult for me to try to determine how fake they are or not, but I will leave that for you to decide. Anyway, we pick it up here at this Judge Thomas J. Devine house. This is the same judge who town of Devine, Texas is actually named after, and the building structure, we're told, is 1849, and it is in Bexar County in San Antonio, and we're told Mr. Judge Thomas J. Devine was also a prominent lawyer, a justice of the peace, the judge of the district, and Supreme Courts. And although being of Irish descent and having the typical Irish temper, he never had trouble and never carried a gun, even in those unsettled times. That's what we're told. The house contains many interesting pieces of handmade furniture which you do not get to see. One of them is a piano which was carried here by ox cart from Kentucky. I pity the ox that carried a piano from Kentucky. And the columns in the facade were also made at the mills in Louisiana and brought here by ox cart. Hopefully different ox, or that would be one dead some be. And it is a 13-room house. And it is also sometime between the original writing here in the 30s and 1975, it was demolished. And it definitely looks lived in, though I do like that. Kind of hard to get a feel for the place. It's got so many different angles. Just look at that single light bulb there, right there. What is going on there? That's fancy old 13-bedroom house, and this is all you got. If I had 200 years of replaced that light switch, Mr. Devine, I'm a little disappointed. Now, you'll notice here we jump from 32 to 93, and one does wonder what happened to the 60 or so properties that were in between here, you know? These surveys get so stripped down, and what's finally given to us, it does make one wonder, don't it? And this is the Nathaniel Lewis house in 1850. It was built, and we're told the builder, Mr. Nathaniel Lewis, was a native of Boston, and upon moving here, he basically had this house, which is an exact replica of his old house in Boston. It's amazing how in those old times they could just look at a picture or a postcard or just from memory and just recount and have a house completely reconstructed in perfection, you know, just based off, I mean, can you do that? You've been inside a house, or the house you live in now, could you move somewhere else and just rebuild the same thing? I don't know. What magic powers they had. And this is a smokehouse and a servant's quarters that were attached. And this one's also been demolished at some point in time. And this here's the John Campman house in San Antonio. And it was built before 1850, though no one knows. He's an unknown architect, although oddly he is listed as the builder and architect for some of the other homes that are on this leg of the survey. But this one is unknown. Kind of interesting. Built of native limestone, and we're told it's a one-story, but actually there's a half basement where the windows are 4.5 feet from the floor here, but 6 inches from the ground outside. These are made with stained glass, so very curious way to build that, isn't it? Originally 16 rooms, and plastering and interior done by an Italian who was brought to the country by Mr. Campman. Imagine that, just being able to just bring an Italian from Italy just to do your interior ceiling medallions and whatnot. Sounds like a strange time to be alive if that's the case. But that is some beautiful ornamentation. And there's those stained glass windows in the aforementioned basement, along with the completely creepy dungeon door. And just look at the sprawling nature of this complex. And very odd, you know. Can't seem to get the layout of it. It seems like it would be like a hotel almost. But nah, it isn't. This is the Francis Louise de Mazière store building and house. A couple different reincarnations. De Mazière died in France in 1862 and willed the property to his brothers and sisters. The upstairs was originally 2 large rooms and was built in 1853, and there are no records of architects or builders, with one exception. The aforementioned Mr. Campman was the stonemason on the residence. And this entire establishment, the reason why it's probably on here, is because it was used as a headquarters by General Twigg prior to the Civil War. The store portion was his office, and we are told that the day after Texas withdrew from the Union and before she joined the Confederacy, Twigg's surrender was received by Judge Devine, who we heard about earlier, Colonel Luckett, and Sam Maverick. General Twigg is reputed to have entertained lavishly, and among his guests were many notables, including Robert E. Lee. And Miss Sarah E. Eager, who lives nearby, gave an anecdotal quote saying that one of those social functions, Robert made the statement, "If Virginia secedes, I go with her." Miss Eager would like you all to know she was the first American white child born in San Antonio. And you'll just have to take her word for it, because she was there and you weren't. This is the Francisco Ruiz house, an adobe, 1 story, and the original builder's unknown. It was used at one time by Colonel Francisco Reese, which is why they named it that. And he was one of the signers of the Declaration of Texas Independence. And he also built a fort, which was located near the site of the first skirmish between the Mexican and Texas troops. So you see, he also has amassed quite a collection of linseed oil cans. So you see, the narrative building is strong in this one. Much less to do with the architectural features thus far. And this is the Veramendi Palace, or so it was called. And this is a rather dated and grainy photograph. Although I'd like to point out, look at this door here with a smaller door cut into it. It's very weird. And this only has 2 photographs. Here's the other one because it's an absolute ruin. And in fact, during the survey, it is described as being completely destroyed. They use these older pictures to represent it, probably because it must contribute to the story somehow. Let's figure it out. This stood for nearly a century in the center of San Antonio and was the scene of very picturesque events. The building was destroyed in 1912. Its massive wooden doors are now kept in the Museum of the Alamo. It was built by Don Fernando Veramendi, who was a private residence. And within the walls of this old building, Colonel James Bowie, of Texas Revolution fame, and the famous knife, wooed and married the beautiful Ursula Veramendi, who was daughter of the vice governor. He came to Texas from Louisiana with his brother, the intention of seeking lost gold and silver. He failed in the attempt to locate these mines, but he returned to San Antonio and married this woman, Ursula, whom he had met on his outward journey. The patio of this place used to extend to the banks of the San Antonio River, where bathing was enjoyed by all guests, and it was used as a residence. And it was toward this palace that General Milam led his men to victory in the Battle of San Antonio, and just inside the great old courtyard door here, he met his death and was buried in the patio. Also later, that same General Twiggs surrendered federal authority to the commissioners of the Southern Confederacy in this same old building. And the commissioners were the Judge Devine, Samuel Maverick, and P.N. Luckett. So what do you know? Everything just woven all together here. Interesting look at the background here, the background of the city. This very old world look going on there. Whenever this photograph was taken, sometime pre-1912. The Ernst Altgeld House. And this is a stone residence, limestone to be exact, built by Mr. Altgeld, who was a prosperous real estate developer of a fashionable residential area in 1878 from a well-born German family. And he established the town site of Comfort, and the original developer of King William Street, also known as Sauerkraut Bend, which is a residential area where most of the prominent families of German origin built their homes and lived until somewhat recently, I guess. Well, until the early 30s. He owned the entire block, and the family was still prominent in business and social circles as far as late as the 70s, and the home is an example of a restrained Victorian, much of the detail reflecting classic, but not as interesting as this, which is St. Mark's Episcopal Church on Pecan Street. And this has got some interesting data points. 1859 was the initial construction by Mr. J. Upjohn. If that name sounds familiar, it should be, because the Mr. Dick Upjohn is of the same family, the man who did much of the work that we ran into in the Rhode Island and the Connecticut surveys. So how about that? All the way over here, you got a family member just building the same kind of churches and stuff that you did over on the East Coast. Very interesting. Anyway, the construction of this was started in 1853, but the first attempt failed, and they dug the foundations up and sold them. Which, I don't know how much you get for a foundation on the secondary market, but I guess it's worthwhile. And eventually, from 1859, they began to construct it a second time. The walls got to be about 7 feet, and then they abandoned the work, and the unfinished walls of the church were frequently mistaken by tourists and strangers as a ruin of an old Spanish mission. Frequently mistaken as a ruin, huh? Couldn't be that it actually just was a ruin, right? No, not at all. No, just an abandoned construction project? Okay. Not sure how much I buy that. But eventually, the Reverend Walter Raleigh Richardson comes to San Antonio in 1868 and becomes the pastor, designed the frescoes on the ceiling and did most of the painting, and he lays out the landscaping and did the windows, which were laboriously wrought out of the designs of the stained glass windows and furnished to the manufacturers. Elaborate drawings made by himself. And today, the body of him rests under the floorboards of the church, with which he had labored during his life. Mr. Colonel Robert E. Lee became a member of St. Mark's congregation in 1856. After the court-martial of the aforementioned General Twigg, Lee was put in command of the Department of Texas, and San Antonio was his headquarters. The United Daughters of the Confederacy have erected a small stone monument in his honor here on the lawn, and in the good old days, those names of people who attended this church were General J.B. Hood and General James Longstreet, and Colonel Samuel Maverick, and Lewis Maverick, who along with Teddy Roosevelt organized the famous Rough Riders. And in no other part of the country can be found any many finer examples of hand-carved woodwork as seen in St. Mark's. That's what we're told. I don't know if you get to see any of it, but that's what you're told. Church is kept in excellent conditions at all times, and this information all comes from a article in the San Antonio Express in 1935. So no, you don't get to see any of the woodwork, but just look at that bad old boy. What a confusing story. And I don't know if not sure if I'm buying some of it, but you know, what do I know? And here's where we all gather on the lawn except Grandpa on his rocking chair. He gets to sit over there all by himself. That's your reward, Grandpa. That's a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale I recognize. I don't know if I should be happy about that. This is an old lime kiln that we are told is on this here property of the house I just skipped past, which is called the Casa Vieja Kiln and Archway. And we're told there are two dome-shaped rock kilns about 400 yards away from Casa Vieja, where lime was made during the construction of the house in 1848. I'm not sure. It just seems odd. It doesn't really seem like a kiln to me. Anytime you find some stone structure off in the woods or on the side of the highway, it's a lime kiln. That's how we do it, America. These narratives follow a pattern, and if you play around in the bull poop enough, well, the pattern becomes kind of clear. But I warn you, it involves a lot of bull poop handling. Bull poop. Funny way to put that. This is the U.S. Courthouse and Post Office in Jefferson in Marion County, and it is a typical example of a small late 19th century federal building in the Romanesque style. Construction began in May 1888, and we know this from some random weird letters where they're arguing about the bricks. It seems sort of forced, honestly. In response to adverse criticism by a building inspector, but they say the water in the basement was a big problem with this place. Imagine that. They didn't know how to drain it, and every time it rained, or when the river's high, it was fully 2 feet high in the basement. So it makes you wonder, why would you dig a basement then if it just filled up with water right away? And during construction, you just struggled with it. Why not just, not have a basement unless it was already there, and, just trying to figure out how to deal with it. And I don't know. It was heated by steam, we are told, and it was occupied by the Postal Service and United States courts, even though at the time the population of the city was 3,000, and it only shrank from there. But still, this is necessary for your post office and courthouse, I suppose. This beautiful building. Just look at that brickwork. And no mention of a brickyard anywhere ever, is there? No, there isn't. And now it's clearly a museum, and it is clearly got that old world beauty. Oh, here we are. Looks like a rather diverse crowd for such a time. And here must be the original drawings. Very similar. This is the Jefferson Playhouse, as you can tell. Just kind of a creepy name for any place, but actually it's a Catholic school that then turned into a Jewish synagogue, and then now apparently is Jefferson Playhouse. And believe it or not, all these pictures are from the same building. So I don't know how it's laid out, but it just seems odd. I don't know if this is the back door or what, but then you've got this door over here, an odd little wooden porch, these little brick piers. I don't know how this place exists in that fashion, but it do. That's its weird history. And it is in Jefferson in Marion County. And this is the Wright Lester House. 1859 is the date of initial construction, or at least the initial date of the purchase. It was bought from a man whose name was Dan Alley. And apparently, there was originally a story and a half, but the upper story wasn't a basement, was destroyed by fire. And so they then made it a 2-story house on top of the old half basement and furnished rather wonderfully. Just look at that. What a remarkable old home. Where did people find the ability to own such fine things? Our little friends here in the fireplace. Yoo-hoo! This is the Sedbury House, and we're told this is one of the finest homes in Jefferson. Well, the finest 19th century houses, anyway. Probably because of that beautiful curved cast iron stairway, I'd say. Just look at that. Golly, beautiful. 1870, we're told it was erected, but no one knows the builder or the architect as usual. The Sedburys were a prominent early family in Jefferson. They operated a drugstore from 1865, was one of the oldest in the state, and we're told that the ground floor is actually paved with brick. Ground floor inside this home, which that is interesting. I don't recall seeing that very often on these surveys, and I just can't get over that ironwork. Beautiful stuff. Looks like Louisiana. Looks like some of the things we see in Louisiana, no? This is the Wibbler Woods House. Unusual style for Northeast Texas region. A distinct French architectural influence is what we are told we are seeing. And according to legend, the house was constructed during the Civil War. The architect is unknown. The earliest known owner was George Wibbler. However, in 1873, the property was confiscated by the sheriff and sold to Samson Egan for $3,200 gold. And there's a bunch of chain of custody was bought and sold a bunch of times. And legend maintains that the house was built for a French doctor. According to the same legend, windows, doors, and shutters were manufactured in France, shipped to New Orleans and then to Jefferson via steamboat, which seems odd for just some regular-looking window, personally. What do I know? I guess not much of anything. That's a weird-looking house. Here we have one of the more bizarre locations on this leg of the survey, and this is what we're told is the Kimball Academy in Bosque County, and what we are told about this structure is a bit mind-boggling. Well, the village of Kimball was founded by a New York lawyer named Richard Kimball and an ex-newspaperman from Jamaica in 1854. The bend site selected was now known as Kimball Bend. It was the only shallow crossing free of quicksand possible for miles and miles up and down the river. There were very rudimentary forms of education in the neighborhood at the time. The very earliest types were built of logs, and these being replaced with stone when it was found that recalcitrant some scholars sometimes burned them to the ground. So because of this, they decided to build this school out of stone. In 1872, it was decided that Kimball was ready for this very same type of education. So the Kimball Academy Building Association was formed. It was probable that this had no architect, and very probable that a master mason was responsible for it. But no one knows. Local limestone quarried nearby set with the greatest precision to form the walls, and during 1873 fall, the classes were ready. Now, at this time, there was a cattle route which was developed through the area, and one of these crossings for this cattle trail was at the shallow ford here. So hundreds of thousands of longhorn cattle passed by, and frequently the school would be engulfed in a sea of longhorns. Some of these scholars would maroon themselves from classes in the branches of oak trees while the semi-wild cattle hurried beneath. Okay, in 1882, the railroads began to move the cattle, and the trail herds were history, and public education was beginning to bring about the decline of the private academy, and so the academy at Kimball flourished into the early decades of the 20th century. But adjacent, more prosperous communities soon eliminated the need, and it's presently a ruin. Its condition seems to be the result of having been mined for materials over a long period of time, rather than fire or other demolition, and inquiries in the neighborhood gave no clue as to the reason for its ruinous estate. So, we are told 1873 it began, and then for 9 years, they were told it flourished into the early decades of the 20th century, so another 30 years or so. And this survey here was taken in 1933. So, somehow in 50 years, this school becomes a ruin, and no one knows how. Huh? In 50 years? With trees growing in the middle of it? Yeah, I don't know about that. That seems like a load of BS to me. I mean, that there's not even a floor in there. There's not even a walkway. There's no glass. That's ridiculous. Seems like y'all got some splaining to do. And this little dumpy little guy, I couldn't find any information about. I guess doesn't really matter too much. I mean, even this one is less of a ruin than that school. This is the Jose Ramirez house, or what's left of it, I guess, and it's been abandoned. I guess it's been abandoned for some time. It's an example of a brick townhouse building, I guess, is what we're told. Why it's on here. This owner was a person of the highest degree of honor, was well respected in the community. Died around 1910, and he occupied himself with politics and ranching interests. And during the bandit trouble along the Texas border immediately after World War I, the complex was occupied as a headquarters for units of the Border Patrol as well as the Texas Rangers, and it has been unoccupied since that time. That's all we're given. That's all we know about the old boy. Very interesting, though. History. Quite the house, really. Surprised that that's actually a house. Looks more like a church or something. But that's not what we're told, so... Silverio de la Peña, drugstore and post office. That is what your eyes are feasting on currently. And this one we're also told was built in 1886. He was a successful druggist. He married a woman by the name of Eliza Howard, who was an orphan, reared by a retired Army officer and his wife, Mr. Major Joseph Burnbrook. And we're told September 1st, 1886 was the date of erection. Shortly after, Silverio was sadly killed, presumably in regard to a political matter. His widow later married Juan Hinojosa. They gave birth to a son, and this individual, with his wife, occupied the structure at the time of the survey. He was the county superintendent of the schools of Starr County, and we're told this is excellent proportions and good handling of detail in the Roman Tuscan order. And why this is on here? Because mastery of the techniques of rubbed brickwork and all. Wall. We were told the architect was Heinrich Portscheller, born in Germany about 1840, and he spent time in the Prussian army, presumably deserted with a fellow soldier, found themselves in Mexico in 1865, and they were immediately pressed into the Imperial Army of Maximilian. They were assigned to an extremely mobile, what is probable, we're told. They were assigned to an extremely mobile unit labeled Contra Guerrillas, and apparently this is all guesswork because as relations between various European states began to disintegrate, national groups represented by these countries fighting allies for Maximilian began to question each other's loyalty and concern themselves regarding the support of Maximilian's cause. So many Germans were reported to have deserted as they moved northward, and this is where we are told this architect came from. It's not known when they deserted, but it seems reasonable that they did so by June 1866. They participated in the liberal side under General Escobedo in the Battle of Santa Gertrudis, which is about 2 miles east of the village of Camargo on the 15th of June, 1866, and the Imperial forces were absolutely defeated. Participants consisted of about 300 Austrians and 1,000 Mexicans, and the French garrison occupying the town during this action made no attempt to. They sacked the town of Mir and retreated southward, and so it was believed that these gentlemen just decided to turn to Rio Grande and live in this neighborhood. And we're told he probably was employed as a mason at a principal brickyard in the area. But no one really knows. And we're told he established a brickyard for the manufacture in Roma, Texas, of a very attractive salmon buff, sand-struck, large brick. This was his product. And he'd made known his intentions in 1884 of becoming an American citizen. It's an interesting story here. Local masons considered it quite an honor to work for him. One mason interviewed in Rio Grande City worked for him for 3 years. He mentioned that Don Enrique, which is what Portscheller's name, eventually the name he took, would prepare the plans. He would make templates for the moldings, and then the other masons would rub or cut the bricks to the profiles determined. He would personally lay up the work involving the intricate architectural profiles, while the other masons would do the standard fill-in work. And his inspiration came from carpenter's manuals of the mid-19th century. There are 2 items of interest in terms of this construction, which I would like to point out. One thing, fermented cactus juice was used as an additive in the mortar. Leaves of the nopal were chopped quite finely and allowed to steep for several weeks prior to use. The liquor fermented was then mixed into the mortar, which apparently is a traditional in the Rio Grande City area. No one knows its origin or why it's done. I guess the suggestions are that this acid material will counteract with the high saline content of the local soil. The other opinion is that it is a binding agent in the mortar itself. And the other item of interest is that the lime was burned locally using mesquite as a fuel. So he apparently built, Mr. Portscheller, in Laredo, many houses and cisterns, an iron bridge, and the old St. Peter's Church. And he also went to Monterey to build buildings for the college. So that is a very interesting story, full of, in the beginning, lots of probablys, but then ending with some pretty substantial evidence. Also, the first mention of anyone in just about any of these surveys that actually had anything to do with brick. So that is very interesting. And this building is quite incredible. Is it possible we've come across the very first believable story regarding a building of this intricate nature in these surveys? It could be. That is something to ruminate upon in my mind. And something I didn't expect. A Prussian army deserter suddenly on the run, being gang pressed into Maximilian's army and then deserting and starting a brickyard, and I don't know, man. It just starts out like it seems like it's just going to be such nonsense, but that one is a little bit convincing, not gonna lie. This is the Church of Our Lady of Refuge of Sinners in Roma, in Starr County, and we are told at the time that revolutions were resulting in the death of priests around 1821 to 1840, and spiritual neglect was evident. But Father John Timon took it as a challenge, along with 12 brothers, decided to revive the spiritually starved area along the Gulf of Mexico. So they founded, from a bare beginning, these 12 priests set out to serve a scattered population of 200,000 people. So on 18th September 1854, this church's cornerstone was laid, and the architect is someone known as Pierre Caralum, often abbreviated to Peter Calum, known as El Santo Padre Pedrito, or the Lost Missionary. He was born in Great Britain, becomes a cabinet maker, studies architecture in Paris, and was ordained at age 35, and designed this church here, and also the Immaculate Conception Church in Brownsville. And we are told his strenuous activity caused him to age prematurely. He was almost blind by the age of 55, and he disappeared one day while riding blind from one ranch to another. And No trace of him was ever found again. Until 1882, a ranchero went into a thick chaparral to disentangle 2 cows, and while engaged in this, he found a skeleton. They identified him by his holy water bottle, a piece of rosary, and his cross. Surmised that he has lost his way, was possibly bitten by a rattlesnake, or possibly succumbed from natural causes, encouraged by his many personal privations. Regardless, that's who's given the credits for designing this here mission. And aside from that distracting personal anecdote about the lost missionary, there's no other information really given here. Bit of a somber note to that one. This here is the Dr. Pleasant Lane House in Lockhart in Caldwell County, and he was one of the first doctors in this section of the state. He came here from Tennessee. During the Civil War, the second floor of his residence was a hospital, and he treated Confederates and Unions soldiers uncomplainingly. And this is all that's left. I thought it was going to be a wood house, but it looks like it's actually brick with some wood addition. Very curious. Now we are out here in the Bonies. The James Blackwell House, 1857, constructed just like everything on this survey in the 1850s, feels like. And the original owner of the house, Mr. James Blackwell, was one of the earliest settlers in the vicinity. Architect unknown, and future not looking bright. And then from this dump, you jump right to this. It's always startling to me. Like, just the fact that these surveyors didn't seem to catch on, that it's like, how you go from that to this? And then you're told that they're the same exact dates constructed? I don't know. But yeah, 1859, initial construction, this one. So, just like the last one. And actually, this one, we are told the same story about the lost missionary. That same group of priests actually built this one as well. We are told that Brother Pierre Roudet took it upon himself to inspire the making of 250,000 bricks of local clay by hand, to collect the funds sent to New Orleans, and to purchase the lumber. He set sail in August 1856 on the ill-fated Nautilus, carrying a cargo of 200 cattle, and in the Galveston Harbor, August 9th, when they arrived, a terrific storm struck the ship, and all were lost, except for one fellow who seized the door, on which he floated for 9 days. You see, Jack from Titanic, you could have done that. And the first bell for the church came from a steamboat, and they talked about some talk of how they got the money to get the bell and the organs, and the 9 crystal bronze chandeliers purchased in Paris. And the bricks were made for a future boys' school, stamped OMI, but requisitioned in 1861 for additions to Fort Brown. And so, yeah, the church with all the wealth. Just look at that thing. It is a very, very interesting building, tied in with the tragic ends of some of the priests in the area. And I don't know how much I buy all that. Just looks so out of place when you look at the rest of the properties in the area, like this one. I don't know what we're doing here. How that can just be existing like that in the midst of such things that look like they're just from a different time. Like it's almost intentional the way they lurch from one style to the other. La Madrilena in Brownsville, Cameron County, Texas is what we're looking at here. Small scale brick corner store, although we're told the detailing is rather unusual. And we're told it was built in 1892 by the gentleman, Mr. Adrian Ortiz, who built this to be the store. And apparently, this was actually a house that was added onto as needed, with various parts of the store added onto. Clothing store, grocery store, with a house attached. But all the store's records were destroyed after the gentleman died, for some reason, and there are no other records since he paid for everything in cash, we are told. Isn't that convenient? No records indeed. But there she is, the old storefront herself. Well, maybe that'll give you enough to mull over for a little while, as Texas continues to parade itself in front of us with all sorts of strange narratives. I'm gonna cut this one short now, but I'll be back very soon, which is where I'll see you.